"You're out by Friday," my landlord Marcus said, slapping an eviction notice on my kitchen counter like it was a winning card in poker. "Illegal renovations, building code violations. I've got documentation from the city inspector. I'd been renting this 3-bedroom apartment in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle for 7 years, paying $400 a month to a man who had steadily increased my rent every single year while doing absolutely nothing to maintain the building. The roof leaked, the pipes were corroded, the electrical system was outdated, and Marcus's response to any maintenance request was a dismissive text, 'It's fine. Stop complaining.' What Marcus didn't know was that I'd already stopped being his tenant, and he was about to find out in a way that would completely destroy his entire rental empire. My name is Sierra Kensington, and I work as a commercial real estate analyst for a firm called Westside Development Partners, here in Seattle. I know property markets. I know how buildings appreciate. I know when a deal is undervalued. And I'd been watching Marcus's portfolio deteriorate for years while I sat in an apartment. I couldn't afford to leave because every place in Seattle costs more money than a small country's GDP. But I had a secret that changed everything 3 years ago. My father passed away and left me an inheritance. I chose to do something else. I spent 2 years researching Marcus's building, not just the apartment I was living in, but the entire structure, a 4-story walk-up built in 1987 that contained 16 apartments. And to commercial spaces on the ground floor. I pulled property records, looked at sales history, reviewed tax documents, and calculated exactly what a building in that condition, with that occupancy rate, should be worth. The answer was approximately $2.8 million. Marcus had purchased it for $1.9 million in 2012. But here's what was interesting. Marcus had been running the building into the ground. He wasn't investing in maintenance. He was extracting maximum rent from tenants while spending the absolute minimum on upkeep. This is a strategy that works in a hot real estate market for a limited amount of time. Eventually, the building becomes too damaged to maintain that rent level and the value collapses. That's exactly where Marcus's building was heading. I contacted a real estate developer I'd worked with in my professional capacity, a woman named Patricia Torres, who specialized in buying distressed properties and renovating them. I laid out the situation, a building that appeared to be worth $2.8 million, but was deteriorating rapidly, a landlord who was extracting rent but not maintaining the property, tenants who were fed up, and commercial spaces that were below market rate. "What's your angle?" Patricia asked. "I want to buy it," I said, "but I need to do it without Marcus knowing I'm involved. If he realizes I'm trying to acquire the building, he'll either raise the asking price or force me out." Patricia smiled. She understood exactly what I was proposing. We created a shell corporation. We used intermediaries. We went through a third-party real estate broker who didn't know that I was the actual buyer. We made an offer on the building that was below the asking price, but high enough that Marcus would seriously consider it. Marcus rejected the offer. He was convinced that the building was worth more than what anyone was offering. He was also completely wrong, but here's where my strategy diverged from just making a better offer. I waited for the market to shift. The Seattle real estate market softened in 2023. Rental rates that had been climbing steadily started to plateau. New buildings came online with better amenities, forcing older buildings to compete. Marcus's property, already deteriorating and underserviced, started to lose appeal. Vacancy rates climbed, tax obligations remained the same while rental income decreased. Marcus was in trouble and he knew it. He started making noise about selling again. The third-party broker I'd been working with made a new offer, lower this time, because the building's condition had genuinely deteriorated and the rental market had softened. This time, Marcus accepted. The purchase closed quietly, the deed transferred to a shell corporation that bore no relation to my name. I used financing from Patricia's company. The whole transaction was designed to be invisible to anyone who didn't specifically research it. And then I waited. I waited for 2 months after the purchase before revealing anything to Marcus. During those 2 months, I continued to be the model tenant. I paid my rent on time. I didn't complain about the maintenance issues. I acted like absolutely nothing had changed. But I was getting everything ready for the moment when everything would change. 2 months after I'd purchased the building, Marcus showed up at my apartment with that eviction notice. The city inspector found code violations, Marcus said, his face red with anger. "You made renovations without permits. You're in violation of your lease. You've got 5 days to vacate, or I'm going to pursue legal action for damages." What had happened was this. I'd quietly hired contractors to begin emergency repairs to the building. Not major renovations, just necessary safety updates, new electrical work to address fire hazards, plumbing repairs to address code violations, roof patches to stop active leaks. All of it needed to be done. All of it was legal and necessary. and all of it showed up to the city building department. The city inspector had flagged the work as not having proper permits. Marcus had been served with notices about code violations, and rather than taking responsibility for the deteriorated state of his own building, Marcus had decided to blame me for the renovations and use it as justification for eviction. That was when I made my move. Actually, I said calmly, I need to tell you something. I bought this building last month. I'm the new owner now. You're not my landlord anymore. I'm yours. Marcus stared at me like I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. What? He said finally. You heard me correctly, I said. I purchased this building through a shell corporation. The deed is in my name through that corporation. The sale closed legally and legitimately, which means you're now a tenant in my building. And your lease is ending in 60 days. Marcus's face went from red to something resembling purple. You can't do this, he said. This is fraud. This is some kind of scheme. It's neither, I said. It's a real estate transaction, a completely legal one. You can call your lawyer if you want to verify. But I think you'll find that my ownership is ironclad. Now, I'd like you to leave my apartment. We can discuss your lease status when you've had time to process this. I watched the moment it sank in, the realization that he had made a catastrophic error. He had sold his building to someone without realizing who that someone was. He had been conducting business with me as a tenant and a property owner simultaneously. Without understanding it, he left without saying another word. Within 24 hours, I received a call from Marcus's lawyer. The lawyer was aggressively defending Marcus's position, claiming that the sale was fraudulent, that I had hidden my identity to circumvent some kind of lease protection, that the transaction should be voided. I had already anticipated this. I brought in my own lawyer, a woman named James Morrison who specialized in real estate litigation, and she was prepared with documentation showing that every aspect of the transaction had been conducted legally and transparently. The Shell Corporation had followed all proper procedures. The intermediaries had acted in good faith. The sale had been completed through normal channels. There was no legal basis for voiding the transaction. Marcus's lawyer eventually backed down, but Marcus himself was not giving up. He refused to vacate his commercial space when his lease ended. He claimed that he'd been illegally evicted, that he was the victim of a scheme, that the building purchase was fraudulent. He filed a lawsuit claiming emotional distress and fraud. He also did something else. He contacted every tenant in the building and told them a story about how I defrauded the building's previous owner, about how their new landlord was dishonest and manipulative, about how they should prepare to be evicted themselves. Most of the tenants didn't believe him. They had all experienced Marcus's neglect firsthand. They had all complained about maintenance issues that never got fixed. They had all paid increasing rent for a deteriorating property. But Marcus managed to poison the well enough that the other tenants became nervous. That's when I did something that turned the entire situation in my favor. I invested in the building. I used money from Patricia's development company to completely renovate the property. We updated the electrical systems to current code. We replaced the roof. We renovated the commercial spaces. We updated the plumbing. We brought the entire building up to modern standards. We also, importantly, made all of this work happen while documenting it meticulously for code compliance. The building transformed. The value immediately increased. The other tenants, who had been worried, suddenly realized they were living in a well-maintained property with a landlord who actually responded to their maintenance requests. They were happy. Marcus remained in his commercial space, occupying it illegally and refusing to pay rent. He was also spending all of his time and money on a lawsuit that his own lawyer was telling him he couldn't win. After 8 months of legal battle, Marcus finally gave up. He moved out of the commercial space. He stopped pursuing the lawsuit. He accepted that he had lost everything by making a catastrophic business decision, but his problems didn't end there. I rented the commercial space immediately to a local coffee roaster who paid significantly more than Marcus's previous rates. The increased income combined with the decreased maintenance costs created a profitable situation for me as a property owner. More importantly, I became a cautionary tale. In Seattle's real estate community, word spread about what I'd done. Other tenants who were being exploited by predatory landlords started looking at acquiring the buildings they rented from. I also became aware that Marcus had done this to other tenants in other buildings. There were people I connected with who shared their own stories of dealing with Marcus' late maintenance responses, rent increases without corresponding improvements, lease violations he got away with because his tenants didn't have the resources to fight back. One of those tenants was a woman named David who worked as an accountant. She had been documenting Marcus's pattern of neglect and discrimination for 3 years. She had records of maintenance requests ignored, lease violations overlooked, and rent increases that didn't correlate with property improvements. I encouraged her to file a complaint with the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections. I helped her compile her documentation. I connected her with tenant advocates who could help her navigate the process. What emerged was a larger pattern. Marcus had been systematically exploiting tenants and extracting maximum profit from properties while providing minimum maintenance. The city investigation resulted in fines, mandatory repairs, and sanctions against his remaining properties. His reputation in the Seattle real estate community was destroyed. Months after all of this had settled, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. He was thin, tired, and older looking than I remembered. He saw me and actually approached me. "I hate you," he said. "You destroyed me." "I didn't destroy you," I said calmly. "You destroyed yourself. You exploited tenants for years. You extracted maximum profit while providing minimum care. You tried to evict me on false pretenses. And when I turned the tables, you couldn't handle it. That's not my fault. That's yours. You cheated," he said. "You defrauded me by hiding your identity." I followed every legal protocol. I corrected. "I just didn't volunteer information you didn't ask for." "That's not fraud. That's business." Marcus turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw him. What happened after that was interesting. I didn't keep the building as a rental property. Instead, I worked with Patricia's development company to convert it into a mixed-use property with individual unit condos and renovated commercial spaces. The tenants had the option to purchase their units at below market rates. Most of them did. They went from renting from an exploitative landlord to owning their own spaces. I made a profit on the transaction. More importantly, I created housing stability for people who had been vulnerable to exploitation. But the real story here isn't about my business savvy or my ability to execute a complex real estate deal. The real story is about what happens when someone who has been exploited decides to stop accepting exploitation and start strategically fighting back. Marcus had every advantage when this story started. He was the property owner. He had resources. He had legal authority over my living situation. I was just a tenant who paid rent and tried to navigate the maintenance issues in a building I didn't control. But I had something Marcus didn't have: intelligence, patience, and a genuine understanding of how real estate works. I spent 2 years studying his property. I spent time figuring out the optimal moment to make my move. I created a plan that was legally airtight, and when I finally executed it, I did so in a way that was completely legitimate and completely devastating to someone who had no idea they were being outmaneuvered. The eviction notice that Marcus tried to serve me became the moment everything reversed for him. Now, years later, I mentor other tenants in similar situations. I help them understand that they're not powerless, that exploitation doesn't have to be permanent, that sometimes the best revenge against a predatory landlord is to become a better landlord yourself. Marcus still lives in Seattle, but he's no longer a major property owner. His empire of rental properties has been reduced to almost nothing. The tenants he exploited have moved on to better situations. The properties he mismanaged are now thriving under new ownership, and I'm still in the Seattle real estate market, but now I'm on the side of the market that makes decisions. I'm the one who decides what gets fixed. I'm the one who decides what rent gets charged. I'm the one with the power. That eviction notice wasn't the beginning of my displacement. It was the beginning of Marcus's downfall. And the only thing I had to do to make it happen was to recognize that I didn't have to accept the situation he decreated for me. Sometimes the best response to a greedy landlord isn't to fight them in court. It's to become their competitor. It's to outmaneuver them. It's to beat them at their own game. And that's exactly what I did.